One second I was standing, the next my legs gave out and I was on the floor. The world didn't go black, it stopped. I couldn't move. The cold kitchen tile pressed against my cheek. Dust bunnies hid under the fridge. I heard the lights hum above me, but I could not move. The first thing I heard wasn't concern or questions. It was my brother's laughter. It wasn't a nervous little chuckle. It was a deep, mocking laugh. The kind he'd been using on me my whole life. Then came my mother's voice, dripping with that familiar, soul-crushing exasperation. "Oh, Clara, get up. What is it now?" They'd called me a drama queen my whole life, a specialist in theatrics, an attention seeker. Every pain, every fear, every tear was another act in a play that only I was starring in. But this was different. They could call me dramatic. They could mock my collapse. But as I was about to find out, they couldn't call an MRI scan drama. And that scan didn't show why I couldn't feel my legs. It showed a lifetime of abuse they could no longer deny. To understand why my family's first reaction was mockery instead of mercy, you have to get the roles we played. In our little family of 4, my brother Mark was the sun. Golden, bright, the center of the universe. My parents orbited him, basking in his glow and charting their lives by his needs. And me? I was the distant, problematic moon, blamed for the tides and the dark. Mark was 2 years older. From the moment I could walk, he learned to push me, and I learned that they would blame me for falling. One of my earliest memories isn't about a scraped knee, but about the verdict that came after. I was 7. Mark dared me to climb to the top of a metal slide at the park, the kind that got scorching hot in the summer. He wanted to see if I was brave. I was. I made it to the top, waved down at him, and he shook the ladder as if it were unintentional. I didn't fall far, but I fell hard. My wrist bent backward with a sickening crack, and I felt it deep in my bones. I remember sitting on the wood chips, crying. I held my wrist as it began to swell into a puffy, misshapen thing. Mark ran to my mother, not with guilt, but with a preemptive strike. Clara fell. She was being clumsy again. When my mom got to me, her first words were a sigh. Not possible to remove the adverb. You're such a drama queen, it's a little fall. She gave my wrist a quick look, declared it a sprain, and told me to stop crying because I was embarrassing her. For weeks, I struggled to grip a pencil correctly. The pain was a constant, throbbing ache. When I complained, my dad would say, "Your brother never cried like this. You need to be tougher." The wrist healed over time, but its appearance remained altered. It still aches on cold days, a dull reminder of a pain that was never believed. It was a little drama. This became the blueprint for our lives. Every illness I had was an exaggeration. The flu was a cold. A migraine was a headache. Strep throat was an excuse to miss school. I learned to hide my suffering. When others didn't believe me, it added a deeper pain. Mark felt as if he were made of glass. A sniffle from him meant a day off school, soup, and constant check-ins. His pain was real. Mine was a performance. They had a whole vocabulary for me. I was too sensitive, reading into things, making mountains out of molehills. If I cried, I was turning on the waterworks. If I got angry, I was having a tantrum. My feelings were a hassle. They disrupted the perfect broadcast of my brother's life. He could do no wrong. He once took $50 from Mom's purse. A month later, he paid it back and got praised for being resourceful. I once forgot to take out the trash and got a half-hour lecture on my inherent irresponsibility. Living in that house was like living in a funhouse, but I was the only one whose reflection was distorted. Everyone else looked normal. I was the one stretched and warped into a grotesque caricature. After a while, you start to believe it. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I am overreacting. The constant gaslighting erodes your reality. You stop trusting your feelings because no one else will confirm them. Your family is supposed to be your witness. When they're the ones telling you that what you feel isn't real, you start to feel like a ghost in your own life. By 28, I was still at home, saving for a tiny apartment. The roles were clear. I was Clara, the dramatic one, the difficult one, the one whose problems weren't quite real. So when I collapsed on that kitchen floor, it wasn't a medical emergency. It was the opening night of my latest show, and they were the unimpressed critics ready to write a bad review. The day it happened began with an ordinary routine. It was a Saturday. I'd spent the morning running errands, trying to ignore a dull throb in my lower back that had been bugging me for a week. I figured I'd slept on it wrong or sat too long at my desk. Complaining at home was pointless. It would count against me in the hypochondriac ledger. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich. My mom sat at the table with a magazine. My dad watched TV in the living room. Mark leaned against the counter, scrolling on his phone. The first sign that something was wrong was a weird tingle in my toes. It felt like fizzy bubbles and a Pin-Zan needle's tingle. It was strange, not scary at first. I shifted my weight, thinking my foot had fallen asleep. But the tingling didn't stop. It started to crawl up my legs, a slow, numbing wave that left nothing in its wake. The connection between my brain and my legs suddenly felt fuzzy, like a bad radio signal. I put a hand on the counter to steady myself. "That's weird," I said, mostly to myself. Mark didn't look up. "What's weird?" he asked, his voice bored. "My legs feel," I couldn't find the word, "funny." My mom glanced up, her brow already knitting with suspicion. "Funny how? Don't start, Clara." "I'm not starting anything," I said, my voice getting shaky as dizziness washed over me. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the granite counter, my knuckles turning white. The tingling was at my hips now, and my sense of control was slipping away fast. It felt like my lower body was being dipped in thick, icy cement. I tried to take a step to prove to myself and them that I was okay. My brain sent the signal, but nothing happened. Someone lost the message. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed me in the chest. I can't feel my legs," I stammered. That's when Mark finally looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. Not concerned. Amusement. "Oh, here we go. What did you read on the internet this time? Catastrophic leg numbness syndrome." And then it happened. My grip failed. My legs were useless anchors, and my upper body pitched forward. The world spun wildly, and I fell hard. My hip and shoulder slammed into the cold tile. The shock of the impact stole my breath. For a second, there was ringing in my ears and the sight of the ceiling lights. I tried to push myself up, tried to move anything. Nothing. My body from the waist down was a foreign country I no longer ruled. Fear, pure and primal, wrapped its fist around my heart. And that's when I heard it. The laughter. Mark was belly laughing like he'd seen the greatest pratfall of all time. "Oh my God," he choked out. "That was a 10 out of 10 for commitment. You threw yourself on the floor." I turned my head toward the living room. I saw my dad lean forward in his recliner, not to get up, but to get a better view of the TV around my body. He let out a heavy sigh. "For the love of—" "Clara, stop the theatrics and get out of the way." Hot tears of humiliation and terror pricked my eyes. I tried to tell them this was real, but my throat was tight. "I can't," I rasped. "I can't move." My mother stood up, but with zero urgency. She walked over, stood above me, and crossed her arms, her face a mask of cold disappointment. "You can't move. Don't be ridiculous. You are a grown woman lying on the kitchen floor for attention. I have never been so embarrassed. Get up, right now." But I couldn't. I felt trapped inside my own body, a prisoner of my silent, screaming nerves. And my captors weren't some mysterious illness. My captors were my family. They stood over me, their disbelief weighing more than my paralyzed limbs. In a sane world, a person collapsing and being unable to move triggers a 911 call. In my family, it triggered a debate. I lay on the floor, the tiles cold seeping into me, while they argued over me like I was a piece of furniture in the wrong spot. "Leave her there," Mark said, his laughter now a contemptuous smirk. "She'll get up when she gets bored." "I can't leave her there, Mark. She's in the way," my mother snapped, annoyed at the inconvenience, not the cause. "Clara, I am not asking you again. Get up." "I'm trying," I whispered, tears now streaming into my hair. I focused all my will on my right leg. Move, twitch, anything, nothing. It was like shouting into a dead phone. The fear was quickly turning into pure terror. This wasn't a joke. My father finally heaved himself out of his chair and stared down at me. "All right, the show is over. Let's get you on the couch." There was no care in their movements. My dad hooked his arms under my armpits, and Mark, with a dramatic groan, grabbed my ankles. They lifted me like a sack of potatoes. My legs dragged, completely limp and useless. The tension was missing, which felt strange. For a moment, I noticed a flicker in my father's eyes. It wasn't a concern, but maybe confusion. But it was gone as fast as it had come. They half-carried, half-dragged me to the living room and dumped me on the old floral sofa. My head hit the armrest with a thud. They didn't prop me up or make me comfortable. They left me there in a heap and went back to their Saturday. My dad turned up the TV volume, drowning out my quiet, choked sobs. My mother returned to the kitchen. The sounds of her making lunch felt like a strange background to my private nightmare. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot poison spreading through my chest. Being terrified and vulnerable, and having that mocked felt cruel. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. They were looking at my reality and telling me it was a lie. I lay there for hours. The sun shifted across the room. I heard my family in the house. They talked about the weather, dinner plans, and a neighbor's new car. They talked about everything except the paralyzed woman in their living room. As evening fell, the fear started to curdle into a cold, hard resolve. The tears dried up. A weird clarity washed over me. They were not going to help me. They were waiting for me to stand up and admit it was all a trick so they could say, "I told you so." They would let me lie there all night before they'd admit they needed a doctor. My well-being was less important than their being right. I was on my own. My phone was in my jeans pocket. A fragile sliver of hope flickered. My arms and hands still worked, though they felt clumsy. With huge effort, I twisted my torso enough to worm my hand into my pocket. My fingers fumbled but finally closed around my phone. Getting it out was a Herculean task that left me sweating and breathless. My fingers shook as I unlocked it. I thought for a second about whom to call. A friend, but I knew this was beyond that. I grabbed the keypad and dialed the 3 numbers for real emergencies, 911. I kept my voice as low as I could. "I need an ambulance," I whispered. "I collapsed, and I can't feel or move my legs." The dispatcher's calm, professional voice was the first bit of validation I'd gotten all day. It felt like a sip of water after dying of thirst. But they heard me. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face like thunder. "Who are you calling?" she demanded. She saw the phone, and her eyes widened with fury. She strode over and tried to snatch it. "Give me that. Are you out of your mind?" "I need a doctor, Mom," I said, my voice cracking, but I held onto the phone with a strength I didn't know I had. "You are not calling an ambulance to this house," my father boomed from the doorway. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this will be? What will the neighbors think? They'll think we're awful people who don't take care of their daughter." The irony was so insane it would have been funny if I weren't so terrified. "Maybe they'd be right," I shot back. It was too late. I'd already given the dispatcher our address. Help was on the way. My parents stared at me, their faces a mix of rage and panic. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their reputation. The flashing lights weren't a threat to my health, but to their perfect family facade. As I lay there waiting, I realized I wasn't a drama queen to them. I was a liability. The siren grew from a distant cry to a roar that filled our quiet street. Red and white lights flashed through the windows, painting the walls in panic. For me, it was the sound of rescue. For my parents, public shame. My mother immediately went into damage control. "All right," she hissed. "When they get in here, you tell them you felt a little faint. Don't make a big deal out of this, Clara. We will look like monsters." My father was already at the door, ready to intercept the paramedics with his performance. When 2 EMTs walked in, my dad greeted them with a folksy, dismissive charm. "Hey, folks. Sorry to drag you out here. My daughter had a dizzy spell. She's always been a bit dramatic." The female paramedic looked right past my father at me on the couch. Her professional expression didn't change, but her eyes met mine for a split second. In that single look, I felt more humanity than my family had shown me all day. She and her partner came over, all efficient and calm. "Ma'am, my name is Sarah. Can you tell us what happened?" she asked gently. As I talked about the tingling, numbness, and collapse, my parents hung back, trying to guide the story. "She stood up quickly, which might have caused her to feel lightheaded," my mother offered. "She barely ate anything today," my dad added. But Sarah and her partner weren't listening to them. They were listening to me. They did a quick neuro assessment. Tom ran a small tool along the sole of my foot. "Can you feel this, Clara?" "No," I whispered. "Nothing." He looked at Sarah. They shared a look that was invisible to my parents but crystal clear to me. This was serious. They started getting me onto a backboard. My mother kept trying to interfere. "Is all this necessary? It seems like a lot of fuss." Sarah finally turned to her, her voice still polite but with an edge of steel. "Ma'am, your daughter is showing symptoms of a potential spinal injury. We are taking every precaution. Please give us some space." My mother fell silent, stunned that her opinion suddenly meant nothing. In the ambulance, for the first time in hours, I could breathe. No one was judging me. No one was calling me a liar. I was a patient. At the hospital, the chaos of the ER was a strange comfort. A kind-faced doctor in his 50s, Dr. Evans, took over. He listened, his eyes never leaving mine. He asked questions with curiosity, not suspicion. He was patient. He was serious. He was the first authority figure in my life who looked at my pain and believed it. After his exam, he straightened up. "Clara, I'm not dismissing this. The complete loss of function in your lower body is a major red flag. I want to get an MRI of your spine and brain right away." My mother, who they'd let back, bristled. "An MRI? Isn't that expensive? Is it necessary?" Dr. Evans turned his calm gaze on her. "Yes, right now, finding out what is wrong with your daughter is the only necessary thing." His tone left no room for argument. The MRI was surreal, a loud tube clanking around me. And for the first time, a dark whisper planted by my family crept back in. What if they find nothing? What if this is all in my head? The thought was more terrifying than any diagnosis. Because if they were right, I wasn't paralyzed. I was insane. After an eternity, they slid me out. I waited in a quiet room with my parents and Mark, a silent, resentful trinity in the corner. Finally, Dr. Evans came back in, holding a series of large, backlit films. His face was etched with a gravity that made the air in the room feel heavy. He clipped the films to the lightbox. Ghostly, black and white images of my skeleton glowed. "Well," he began softly, "we found the problem." He pointed to my thoracic spine. "This is a large, acute spinal epidural hematoma. It's a bleed that is putting extreme pressure on your spinal cord. That's what caused the paralysis. We need to get you into surgery to relieve that pressure as soon as possible." My mother gasped. My father's face went white. But Dr. Evans wasn't done. He clipped up another film, this one of my wrist. "But we found some other things that tell a longer story." He pointed to a spot. "You see this? It's a poorly healed scaphoid fracture in your right wrist. Based on the bone, it looks like it happened when you were a child and never got proper medical attention. That's why you likely have chronic pain there." He put up another scan of my back. And here," he said, pointing to faint lines on my vertebrae. "We see evidence of many old compression fractures, the kind of thing you might see from a significant fall that was never treated." He finally turned from the scans and looked directly at my parents. His voice was no longer a doctor's, it was a judge's. "Clara didn't have a dizzy spell. She has a life-threatening condition. But these scans, they don't show a medical event. They show a medical history, a pattern of significant injuries that were ignored. They show neglect." The room was dead silent. Mark, for the first time in his life, looked speechless. My father seemed to shrink. My mother stared at the glowing images of my broken past, her face a canvas of disbelief. The doctor's words were the vindication I had stopped daring to even hope for. It was about everything. Every "you're faking" and "you're being dramatic" showed up. Each dismissed pain was clear. It all spoke in the undeniable language of bone and tissue. It was proof. My pain was real. It has always been real. Dr. Evans let the weight of his words hang in the air. He didn't raise his voice, but his calm words hit harder than any scream. He'd taken my entire life of being called a liar and dismantled it with medical proof. My mother was the first to speak, her voice thin and shaky. "Fractures, but the doctors always said she was fine. She was clumsy." She looked desperately at my father for backup, but he stared at the floor, his face ashen. Mark, my bold, untouchable brother, leaned against the wall. His usual smirk was missing. He looked at the scans, then at me, then back at the scans. The joke had just been revealed as a tragedy, and he was one of the villains. Dr. Evans looked at me. "Clara, we need to get you prepped for surgery. I can have a nurse talk to your family, or I can ask them to wait outside." For my entire life, their presence was a given and oppressive force. But now, for the first time, I have a choice, a powerful choice. "I'd like to speak to them," I said, my voice weak but steady. "Alone." Dr. Evans nodded, gave my parents one last stern look, and quietly left. The silence they left behind was suffocating. All their bluster, their certainty, their lifelong campaign against me, it was all gone. All that was left was the glowing evidence on the wall and me in the hospital bed. I took a breath. I didn't feel anger, not yet, a profound, hollow sadness. I looked at these three people, my supposed safe harbor, and saw strangers. They had built their family on my pain. "So," I began in a soft voice, "it wasn't drama after all." My mother started to cry, but they were tears of self-pity. "Clara, honey, we didn't know. We never would have if we had known it was serious." "How could you not know?" I asked a genuine question. I told you my wrist hurt for weeks. I told you I couldn't breathe right after I fell from the treehouse Mark pushed me from. I told you again and again that I was in pain. You didn't listen. It was easier to call me a liar." My father finally looked up, his eyes red. "We're not bad people, Clara." "Aren't you?" I shot back, my voice gaining strength. "What do you call people who laugh at someone who is paralyzed? Who cares more about what the neighbors think than their own daughter's health? The neighbors might think you're monsters because maybe you are." I turned my head and looked at my brother. He flinched. "You laughed," I said simply. "I was on the floor, terrified, and you laughed. Was it that funny, Mark?" He shook his head, looking down at his shoes like a little kid. The golden boy was tarnished. "I want you to leave," I said, the words feeling solid and real. "Clara, don't be like this," my mother pleaded. "We're your family. We need to be here for you." "No," I said, the word a shield. "You don't need to be here. You want to be here now because a doctor finally told you this is real. You want to be here so you can feel like you're doing the right thing now that it's been proven. But you failed. You failed the test. Not today, but for my entire life. The proof is glowing on the wall behind you." I looked at each of them one last time. My mother's panicked, tear-stained face. My father looked broken and old. My brother a hollowed-out bully. "Your presence here isn't a comfort," I said, each word a stone building a new wall. "It's a reminder of every single time you let me down. I have to go into surgery, and I need to do it without the weight of your guilt and your excuses in the room with me. So please leave, and don't come back." Stunned into silence, they turned and walked out. As the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 28 years. The room was finally quiet. The drama was finally over. They say blood is thicker than water. But what if those who should protect you are the ones causing harm? It's a terrible, lonely place to be. Have you ever had your pain dismissed by the people who are supposed to believe you, no matter what? Let me know your story in the comments. Reading them helps more than you know. And if you've ever felt unheard, make sure to subscribe. This is a community for sharing the stories that need to be told, for the voices that have been silenced for too long. Your story matters here. The surgery was a success. Dr. Evans had relieved the pressure on my spinal cord, but he was blunt about what was next. The damage was significant. Recovery wasn't guaranteed. It was going to be a battle. When I woke up, the first thing I did was try to wiggle my toes. Under the starchy hospital blanket, I felt it. A tiny, almost imperceptible twitch. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever felt. The next few months were grueling. I went to a specialized rehab center. Each day was filled with hard, painful work. It was exhausting. Learning to sit up, learning to move from the bed to a wheelchair. I stood between the parallel bars, legs shaking and sweat dripping down my face. I was trying to teach my nerves and muscles to work together again. My family tried to get through. They called, texted, and sent flowers. I had the nurses throw the flowers away. I blocked their numbers. I sent their letters back unopened. My aunt, my mom's estranged sister who had always seen the truth of our home, was the one who showed up. She helped me find a lawyer and pack my things from their house while I was in rehab. She never once questioned my decision. She was my family now. There were dark days, days when the frustration brought me to tears. But even on the worst of those days, there was a strange peace. The loudest, most damaging noise in my life, the constant chorus of their disbelief, was gone. That silence was healing. I was healing my body, yes, but I was also healing from a lifetime of being told I didn't matter. 6 months later, I took my first unassisted steps. They were wobbly and uncertain, but they were mine. A year after the collapse, I was walking with a cane, living in my small apartment and working from home. My life was quiet and small, but it was authentic. It was mine. Sometimes I think about that day. The cold floor, the terror, the laughter. That sound almost broke me. It was the peak of a lifetime of being told I wasn't real. But in the end, the laughter that was supposed to be my breaking point became my beginning. The silence I chose after, when I cut them out of my life, is what let me truly heal. I learned that family isn't an obligation you're born into. It's not about blood. It's about who shows up, who holds your hand while you learn to walk again, who listens to your pain and says, "I believe you." My parents and my brother tried to write my story as a trivial little comedy. They wanted me to be the punchline, but I took the pen back from them that day in the hospital. My story isn't a comedy. It's a story of survival, and I'm the only one who gets to write the ending. Thanks for listening. If this resonated with you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own experiences. You never know who needs to hear that they aren't alone. I'll see you in the next one.